Well, now we're going to switch to a very different topic. And Tyler Clark at the Center for Gifted Studies, right here, is going to share with some information on artificial intelligence. You're on, Tyler.
So let me share my slides here. So this is a slide deck that I put together for another session that we did earlier this year. And as you can see, the image that is created here, I asked ChatGPT to create it for me. I just put in, I'm doing a session about AI for gifted and talented education folks, and it generated this image for me, and it also generated this title, Navigating New Frontiers: AI's Impact on Gifted and Talented Education. So let's start off with a poll here. I'm going to launch this. You should be able to see it on your screen. What is how would you describe your current relationship with AI? So are you an AI enthusiast? You're all in and love exploring. You're a curious explorer, cautious observer, skeptical, or are you an AI avoider? It looks like we have folks across the different levels. We have one person who is an AI enthusiast. 11 of you are curious explorers. Looks like 38% are cautious observers. You see the potential, but you're still on the fence. One of you is skeptical, and it looks like none of you are AI avoiders at this stage. So if you could put in the chat, what are your initial thoughts on the potential roles of AI in supporting gifted education? We'll address some of these of what we can do with gifted ed. I'm going to pull the chat up here so I can see it. I'll just go on to the next because I can't get my chat up at the same time. So we gave this scenario about a student to some, I think they were superintendents, and said, Caitlin is really good at math. Actually, she is a good student overall. She would like to apply to the Gatton Academy when she's a sophomore. The problem, that application requires completing Algebra 2 and geometry by the end of sophomore year, and her school doesn't start algebra until ninth grade. So we gave that to some superintendents, um, and had them think through their own contexts. But then we also gave it to ChatGPT just to see what it would come up with. I think a lot of times when we're looking at artificial intelligence in gifted education, what I've seen out there so far is how are we using it with students? How are students themselves using it in our classrooms? But we were thinking, how can we use it as educators in order to inform some of our decisions as well? So I'm going to pull up this conversation that we had, and I just said I have a description of a student I want to give you and ask you questions. It said, of course, it's always agreeable. It will help. Um, I gave that exact description to ChatGPT, and then it said, what specific questions do you have? I gave it a grade level where she is right now. I said, assume she's in fifth grade. What can I do to ensure her potential? It gave me a few options: acceleration options, individualized learning plan, enrichment programs, online resources, tutoring or mentoring, summer programs. So it gave a lot of really useful and appropriate guidelines about how AI could be used. And then I said, I'm her gifted resource teacher. What might I do um, with her, given that I see her for 1 hour a week in a general pullout program? And again, it gave some useful ideas and tips and strategies that could be implemented. I asked, can it develop a 1 week curriculum that I can work with to implement in the classroom to help her? So not just during the pullout program, but what are some things that we can do in the general classroom? So it gave me a week schedule. Day one, introduction to advanced concepts, morning and afternoon sessions. Um, and it broke it out. So in the classroom, this is how we can do it. And then in a small group with Caitlin, how we can do it. And it goes through 5 days of the week. So some useful scenarios that could be used. And then what courses and when should Caitlin take to fulfill her goals? This is where it gets a little iffy, and we need to make sure that we are being critical of what AI is giving us and not just using it right out. So to fulfill her goal of applying to the Gatton Academy, it says in middle school, and this is saying a typical middle school curriculum would have pre-algebra in sixth grade, algebra one in seventh grade, and geometry in eighth grade. Well, as we talked about in the session before with Michael, this is probably not what you typically see in a middle school curriculum for math. A lot of times we would not give algebra one until eighth grade for students. So ChatGPT had that information and that assumption wrong. Um, as I saw that, I said, this is not the typical middle or high school curriculum that you mentioned. And it said, oh, I'm sorry. And then it corrected that and said, this is the typical curriculum. And it gave ideas about what Caitlin could be doing. So that's kind of an overview of a profile that we could use with ChatGPT, and if you want to use some of the other technologies as well. And I see that Toddy has mentioned here the chat is disabled for her. So if you all just want to post in the Q&A box, um, that'll be fine as well. So there are two more scenarios that we'll share with you after this, and I hope that you'll go and put those into ChatGPT and just see what it says and just kind of have a dialogue with AI and see what recommendations it comes up with for you, and ask it questions. And when you think that it's telling you something that's incorrect or maybe doesn't fit your scenario, describe your scenario a little bit better and see what it comes up with. We've also looked at this a little bit as a differentiation tool. We know that a lot of times teachers struggle with differentiating for gifted students. They don't have the time sometimes. So a research study that Julia and I have just completed, and we're in the process of writing it up and submitting it for publication, is looking at Bloom's taxonomy. So we use two different AI tools. We use ChatGPT and Google Bard, which is now Google Gemini. And we also used a human, and we asked it to generate a question for each level of Bloom's taxonomy at the elementary school level for three different areas. We asked it for math, science, and language arts. And then we gave it these questions that were generated to experts in gifted education and curriculum development and asked them to indicate whether they believed that the questions were appropriate to the intended level of Bloom's taxonomy. And what we found overall was that the experts in curriculum development believed that ChatGPT and Google Bard, Google Gemini now, were um, we're pretty good at developing questions for individual levels of Bloom's taxonomy. Um, so that points to how we could use it to maybe support teachers who are in the classroom to be able to differentiate for gifted learners in various content levels. Again, I want to caution you, you need to make sure that you're looking at what the AI is giving you and that it's appropriate. Just because the research study that we did showed in those instances that AI was providing the appropriate levels, it doesn't mean that it's always going to do that. So there is some part of human critical thinking that still has to go into play with that. We're also interested in looking at tiered instruction, choice boards, think-tac-toe, pre-assessments, things like that. Something Joy and I talked about recently was maybe looking at rubrics and how AI and rubric development could be um, helpful. So other considerations when you're looking at AI is the accuracy. We saw that the middle school curriculum that it viewed as typical was not actually typical. There are privacy concerns. So when you put that information, you put your information into publicly available AI systems, that is then giving the AI system information that it learns from. So you want to make sure that you're never putting any student identifiable information in there. If there is private information, you want to make sure you're not including that. There are a lot of ethical concerns. I think that we're making some headway on that. In higher education and academia, we have publishers that are putting out guidelines about when it's okay to use AI, when it's not okay to use AI. But we have to think about what are the ethical considerations. And I don't have a clear answer for that. I don't know that anybody has a clear answer, but I do think that we are making headway. Um, how can we use it for identification? What can we ask it that would be helpful about specific students and trying to identify as many students as possible? And then we looked at some service options specific for Caitlin in math, but what can we give it about individual students that were struggling to find different service options for them? So that was what I had prepared for today. If anyone has any questions, you can put them in the Q&A box. Sorry for the technical challenge there.
So Tyler, um, I bet people on this call provide the range of experience with AI from never having used it to using it with some frequency. How do you think someone who's never entered the artificial intelligence um, experience should get a start? What should they do?
And I think that what you said, we have people from all across the experience levels with AI. We didn't have anybody that's actively avoiding AI on the call, or at least nobody mentioned that they were. But I know that there are people out there. It's a fairly new technology in the way that we're seeing it now. It's AI has been around for years and years. We're using it when we look at Siri on our phone, or if we're using Amazon Alexa. You're using it every day in Word and things like that, but we haven't really thought about it from the generative AI standpoint that we're using now. Um, Something that I heard at a conference that we were at recently, Joya, is to have an AI buddy. So somebody that would be with you and kind of encourage you. And if you have questions or if you're reluctant and not really sure how to move forward with using AI, to have that buddy that kind of will support you, give you ideas, and encourage you to try new things. I think the best way is just get started. Go into AI and ask it a question. We ask questions every day. Why don't you just ask AI that question and see what it poses? Um, and then make sure that you are critically analyzing what the response is. Um, and you can have a dialogue with AI. It may come up with something that you never thought about and you want to learn more about, and you can ask it specific about that.
Yes, having a tech buddy was something we did hear about, and that person doesn't necessarily have to be far more advanced in technology than you, but it's somebody you're talking about so that you're thinking about it and reflecting on what you're learning and what you could do next.
And Julia, I would maybe the tech buddy idea is fairly new to me, but I would also think about it when we talk about gifted education. We know that using a gifted student to teach someone else who's struggling is not best practice. We need to make sure that our tech buddies are not so far above us that they're not able to come to where we are and get us from a starting point. Otherwise, it's just not helping us at all. But we also want to make sure that they're not so far below us that they're not challenging us and getting us to a new level. So I think
I
that's
think
important.
that's a good point.
I see that Toddy has mentioned she likes the idea of an AI buddy. She's still hesitant about using it because it's an unknown to me. I think that it definitely is an unknown. It is a massive advancement of technology that's come on the scene all of a sudden, and we're starting to see it in more and more tools more transparently. Um, so I think that yes, Toddy and AI Buddy would help, but again, just get started, try some things. It doesn't mean that you have to use what is given to you, um, but trying it and figuring out what it's going to give you is the first step to start.
And please remember, you're the expert. If you're looking at curriculum, if you can't just take what it gives you as best practice. You've got to know that, and perhaps it's a tool that can help you save time, but you still have the brain, you've got the knowledge that you need to look at it and not just use it because that's what was produced. So, any advice on working with students? And we know they're using AI, and many of them are really pretty sophisticated with the use of AI.
I think that it's a technology that is not going away. I think that it's only going to advance, and it's going to be something that is expected to be used in the workforce. Um, it already is in some places, but it's going to become more predominant, and it's going to be something that we have to get used to, and we have to be preparing our students to use it in the appropriate ways. So I think talking with the students and making them aware of what are your views on AI? When is it acceptable to use it? When is it not acceptable to use it? Um, in my class that I'm teaching right now, I've told my students that AI is a great tool, but it is not a tool that I'm wanting them to use to write things for them. I'm happy for them to use it to generate ideas, to ask it questions, and go from there. But writing to me for this particular course, and probably for a lot of courses, that's not what AI is meant to do. It is meant to help you expand your ideas, think about things in new ways, brainstorm, but it's not meant to do the work for you. So we need to make sure that we are telling students that and being very transparent with when is it able to be used and when it's not. And you
So,
might go into AI and ask it, I'm wanting to develop this lesson with students and I want them to use AI as a component of that and just see what it comes up with. And again, you don't have to use what it says, but it may come up with some good ideas that you might like.
so we can look at AI as an idea generator.
Yes, absolutely. I see a question here from Kathy. She said, which AI site did you use to generate the image you showed us? I think that that was ChatGPT. It was back, there's been several different versions that have come out. There was 3.5 that was available. I had the 4 version, which was the paid version, and it had an app at the time called Dolly. It was one of the first apps that was integrated into ChatGPT, and that's what I used for generating that image. And I see that B has asked a question here. Did you find one of the AI platforms to be better than the other, ChatGPT or Gemini? Um, I think that it varies depending on the specific use case. Um, Last time I was playing with Google Gemini, it was not able to do quite as much as ChatGPT was. It was mostly just text-based. I'm not sure if it has progressed much since the last time I used it a couple of months ago, but ChatGPT was more robust with being able to create those images. They've added all kinds of different apps in there. You can go, I was looking at how to grow pumpkins better because I had some pumpkins outside, and they have an app in there that you can download, and it's installed directly into ChatGPT, but it was something about gardening, and it would give more specific and more detailed answers from a gardener standpoint, whereas ChatGPT might just pull it from general resources. Um, so I think that it really depends on what you're trying to do. Try out a couple of them. I know that when I did a workshop, I think it was in April, I gave the option of using ChatGPT or using Gemini. And several of the folks that tried to use Gemini, their school had blocked that. And I'm not sure if their school had consciously blocked that or if it was just, it was a new feature added into their Google Suite and it defaults to blocking it. So it may be that your school does not allow you to use Gemini, so you'll have to use some other tool or get your IT to open it up.
So are schools developing policies related to AI?
I've not seen any policies that schools have developed. I know at the university, they are talking about AI. They have some sample policies for faculty members to include in their syllabus. They're also collecting different AI use cases. Um, I saw that come out in mid-August, but I've not necessarily heard about any K-12 school districts developing policies with AI, but I I believe that's probably just around the corner as a necessary thing that needs to be created. If anybody on here does have policies that their school is working with, please share them with us so that we can take a look with them, because I think policies are going to be necessary, and just grappling with the ethics of using AI, how we can use it, how we indicate that we've used it. You saw on my first slide, I had an asterisk that said this was generated using AI. Um, when do we need to make sure that we're very transparent and upfront with how AI was used?
Any other questions for Tyler on AI? Or any information about policies you have that we haven't heard about yet?
And again, you can put that in the Q&A. I know that the chat is locked down for some folks. Sorry about that. But if you want to put any comments, just put them in the Q&A box.
Well, thank you very much, Tyler. Um, there's so many topics that are important in gifted ed, and that's kind of a new one. Um, it's not just important in gifted ed, it's important probably in everything we do, but it certainly impacts us in gifted education.